another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin. And we are going to do something that we have never done at Camp Dynasty today. A Camp Dynasty first, Collin, in year 3. We are going to do a way too early 2025 Dynasty Rookie Mock Draft with hypothetical landing spots from our friends at Tankathon.
So early. I mean, you're knocking on the door at 3 a.m. The store opens at like 8. That's how early we are.
Yeah. Setting up the tents, like we're getting ready. Yeah, I mean, we're crazy, but the good news is that there are other crazy people out there that have multiple round mock drafts already being put out. I do have some beef with some of the mock drafts that I came across today, because we're at a point now, late stage internet, where I can't even click on some of these links and read the articles because I am just bombarded by pop-up ads and videos and banner ads. Like there was a 7-round mock draft already, and I couldn't even read it because I couldn't navigate the page. It kept resetting every time a new pop-up came up.
And that's why the people come to Camp Dynasty, because you can listen without being bombarded by advertisements every 2 seconds. Just sit back and enjoy.
Exactly. I like that. I like what you did there. That was really nice. So, like I said, we are operating off of Tankathon's current mock draft. If you search it up, 2025 NFL mock from Tankathon, that is what we are using. I will include the link to this mock draft in the description of this episode, because A, thanks to them for putting out this content and letting us steal it and use it. But B, check it out because it's very interesting. This is the first time now that I've looked at this class, like what are other people saying about the class? And I got to say, we were pretty good. We were pretty close based off of this mock in terms of the order that some of these skill players went in this mock draft, but not all of them. And some of them, as we're going to find out, maybe ended up in some very undesirable spots, and that will affect us here today. But
somebody might have fallen out of my first round because of their landing spot.
There are two. One specifically that there is a player that has plummeted down my rankings. So there's the teaser.
Yep.
And we'll share the spots as we go through this. If you want to, reference along, I don't know why you would do that if you're just listening casually to a podcast, but the link's there. Go click on it. You can see all these spots. I am going to flip not a coin today, Collin. I am going to flip my commemorative Hall of Fame. What would you call this? A coin? A medallion, maybe?
It's somewhere between there. It's like a disc of metal. So where you fall on coin or medallion, I think depends on the thickness of it. And it's pretty hardy. So maybe medallion is the right way to go. Yeah,
some sort of hybrid of the two. But in our league, we started something this year, a Hall of Fame class for our main Dynasty league that we're a part of, and a good friend of ours and a league mate made these commemorative medallions for the players. And I was lucky enough, because I've been there from the start, and I drafted J.J. Watt when we kicked things off in 2013 to get a Hall of Fame medallion.
That was 11 years ago. You entered the league.
I don't like thinking
it's
about
impressive.
That. But we've been at this for a long time. So let's flip the medallion. And it is tails.
Oof.
So you, my friend, have the honors of starting us off in this mock. Now, before I'll give you a little extra time to think here, because before we get started, I have to say we are throwing an additional wrinkle into this mock. We are not just introducing these landing spots. We are also going to operate under the assumption that Travis Hunter was drafted to the NFL as a wide receiver, that his primary position in the NFL will be receiver. Maybe there's some mysterious reports of him potentially playing both ways, but we don't know that yet. We just know that he's going to be playing receiver. So we are going to throw him into this first round because he's going to be there. If that's what we find out come draft day in the NFL, he will be in the first round of these mock drafts. So we're going to explore that scenario today. And with all of that said, you are on the clock.
Now, question, while I'm on the clock, because I'm so confident in my number one pick that so Travis Hunter, I think he'll be in the NFL as a corner because he's like, one of my friends was talking to me and he's like, yeah, he's a good wide receiver, but he's an elite corner. Like, it's like the Deion Sanders thing kind of all over again, where, yeah, Deion probably could have played wide receiver in the league and he'd have been good, but he was a generational corner. Oh, do you agree with that sentiment?
I think that's fair to say right now. I think the counterpoint is what you brought up a few weeks ago,
The money.
which is the money.
Yeah.
And I think that's also very real.
All that being said, I'm taking Quinshon Judkins, number one overall. He is my number one running back. Before looking at this, and then in this draft, they have him going in the first round, pick 28, to the Bengals. And we know the Bengals are operating with Zach Moss, Chase Brown, and other guys that are going to be fighting for roster spots throughout the season. And Judkins walks in as a bona fide day one starter, supplanting Zach Moss, I don't know what his contract is looking like, but Zach Moss is nice as a fill-in handcuff, put him in, see what happens. Judkins is a real talent. So I want him number one. I've had him number one. If he gets first round capital, I mean, that would be bonkers, first of all. And second of all, like, having that landing spot would also be incredible. So a little double whammy, feels pretty good.
Yeah, this also would have been my pick at 101 had I won the coin flip, because I think, and this is why it's fun to bring in landing spots, even when they're just, for fun right now, because it really does change your entire perception of the top of this class when you see a running back like Quinshon Judkins tied to a team like the Bengals. When I'm sitting here, like, I'm envisioning this, a player of this caliber entering an offense of this caliber, one that is now in need of a running back, and Joe Mixon is gone. There's some names there, like you said, with Moss and Chase Brown, but I would not be surprised at all if this is a team that is targeting an upgrade next offseason, whether that be through free agency or the draft. And I think the draft probably makes more sense for them. So I love the pick here for the Bengals in this mock draft. And then I ultimately love your pick here at the top of this draft with Quinshon Judkins.
That means that you are on the clock with pick number 2.
And so here's where we get weird already, because last week when we did our rankings, like, I'm going wide receivers on the top, I'm going running backs next. I'm not taking any of my top 4 players right now at number 2.
Oh, I know you're taking that.
I'm taking Ollie Gordon at number 2. Why am I doing that? Because Ollie Gordon also went in round 1 in this mock draft, and he went to the Cowboys. And I don't think right now it's like irresponsible to say or to explore the idea of Ollie Gordon being a first round pick. I personally don't have him there right now. He was my RB3 in this class right now, independent of all of this. But I think a player like this, even if he is a second round pick to the Cowboys, I still think it's a very alluring spot, considering they did not address the position at all this offseason. Rico Dowdle is seemingly the guy in alongside of, what can Zeke bring back to this offense. So some version of one of those two or a combination of the two of them. But I mean, however you split it, this team needs a running back. And I think a player like Ollie Gordon, we talk about his skill set, not only as a power back, but as a player that has some home run ability in his game, that has a lot of pass catching upside in his game already. I think that's maybe why you see a player like this end up in the first round in the NFL, or at least in those conversations. And in this case, the landing spot, the draft capital, and everything lines up where I'm like, I got to do this. Ollie Gordon, number 2.
Yeah, this is where I would have gone as well. I mean, the landing spot alone is enough where people would be, fighting to put him number 1 in a lot of situations. I wouldn't be surprised if people did take him number 1 if he goes number 25 to the Cowboys. Like, there's just no competition in this room. And, we were all kind of waiting for them to address it with this draft class in 2024, and they didn't do that. We were kind of mocking Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson to the Cowboys, seeing, hey, what's going on? Like, you guys don't really have a running back, and they didn't address it. So now we get to 2025, and we're going to mock them some running backs, and hopefully they take one of these guys, and then they can jump up that fantasy value and their dynasty value with a good offensive team, that has a good passing game. So you don't have guys like 8 guys sitting in the box. That applies to both, the Cowboys landing spot and the Bengals landing spot, where you're going to have guys respecting the pass game enough where you can have a little bit of room to run before those linebacker safeties are up in your face. So, I mean, I'm all over this. I love it. If it ends up being this way, that would be perfect for fantasy.
I do find it very funny that it feels pretty real that the Cowboys went into the draft and maybe even the entire offseason, like Jonathan Brooks, no matter what. And then Jerry Jones, his blunder when he's speaking about the board, it's like, and then the Panthers jump them. It's like, that might have literally just thrown off the entire plan that this team had at running back. And now they have Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott in 2024.
It's insane. I forgot about that until you just brought it back up.
It's almost unbelievable, but it's on video.
It's like, I wouldn't even do that drunk at a fantasy draft.
Right.
I wouldn't be like, I'm so glad I got Malachi Corley. And it's like, bro, he's still on the board. You haven't even drafted yet. It's like, oh.
Oh my God. When you treat your fantasy draft more importantly than the multi-billion-dollar franchise you run.
Have you seen the off-season Hard Knocks for the Giants?
I've seen some clips, and I think I need to dive into the full thing.
It's like really puts in perspective how similar it is to just like playing fantasy, because it's like Joe Shane talking to the Panthers GM at the Senior Bowl, and like Panthers GM's like, hey, you want to give me 2 firsts for Brian Burns? Joe Shane's like, I mean, kinda. And then it just like happens. Like it's crazy.
I saw somebody say about the offseason Hard Knocks, like, this was incredible television and no NFL team will ever agree to do it again.
Yeah, it's way too much access. Like, you're seeing I mean, they release it a couple months after, so it's not like you're getting any information.
Right.
But also you can be like, if any of this backfires, you can see like every single step of everything and like point to it and be like, why did he do that right there? You know?
Right.
So
I also love the PR training, like, that you got to see, where it's like, this is happening, but when you don't get to see it, you're like, yeah, maybe he's just like that, and then it's like Joe Shane rehearsing his answers and then saying that verbatim in the press conference. It's like, all right, okay.
Yeah, he's not like that at all.
Yeah. All right. So picks 1 and 2, both running backs. The 2025 draft is back. We are back with running backs. Will the streak continue? I don't know. You are on the clock at 103.
Well, we've got a top 10 wide receiver here. And I'm going to go with Luther Burden the third. He is my wide receiver 2 without these rankings. I'll explain why he's my wide receiver 1 after these rankings. First of all, he was drafted higher than Tetairoa McMillan in this mock draft, who is my wide receiver 1, and he got a better landing spot. We can talk about McMillan later, but Burden gets drafted to the Cardinals here, which I love. I mean, you talk about 2 wide receivers that complement each other perfectly. Marvin Harrison Jr. and Luther Burden getting the ball from Kyler Murray. Like, that's just a dream scenario for this rebuild that this team is going on for the offensive weapons. Now, we do need to get a little bit of protection up front for poor little Kyler, but as of now, we got some good weapons, and we'll see how this offensive line develops and how the timing, I feel like when you're throwing to like injured Marquise Brown and like Trey McBride's your number 1 target. No disrespect to Trey McBride, but he's not the fastest cat. Like, it takes a little bit to get into your drops, and that doesn't help with your timing, doesn't help with pass rush. So you get someone like Burden out there, someone like Marvin out there who are getting open early and often and who you can get the ball to and they can do some stuff after the catch, especially Burden, who's one of the better after the catch receivers that we've seen in a while. So, I mean, this is a great match. Like, you could say something about them going wide receiver, top 10 2 years in a row. If Burden's on the board at 10 and you're the Panthers or you're the Cardinals, you got to feel great about doing this.
Yeah. I mean, I at first when I saw it, I was like, that's kind of interesting, but I mean, at the end of the day, man, we're in an era where a lot of really, really good teams, like Super Bowl contending teams, they have these 1-2 punches. I mean, Philly, Cincinnati, I mean, Miami, all of these teams have 2 premier wide receivers. And I think
Kansas City.
I was like, wait, what? Xavier Worthy. Did we see the clip on the timeline?
Hollywood Brown.
Oh, God, they're set.
Yeah.
But Luther Burden, like, I love this even more also because I think right now it takes a little bit of the pressure off of him to not have to be the number 1 guy immediately. Like, I do have a little bit of concern about, can he walk into the NFL and can his game in its current form translate to being the guy in a wide receiver room? Can he do all of those things that elite wide receivers do in the NFL right now? And in this situation, he's got that guy across from him. I mean, Marvin is that guy, or at least he should be that guy. So now we have a player that can work underneath. You can scheme touches for, you can get the ball in his hands. He doesn't have to be your number 1 look on every play. And so, yeah, I love the spot, and I think this pick makes a lot of sense. We'll talk about, obviously, some of the other landing spots that may have influenced this pick as well, but I think this definitely makes a ton of sense at number 3. At number 4, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take Travis Hunter at number 4.
Oof, there it is.
So first and foremost, what happened in this mock? Travis Hunter went
number
6th overall to the Washington Commanders. So in this mock, is it an assumption that he is playing corner? Potentially. Like, is that how he gets to 6th overall? Potentially. But we've also talked about how impressive Travis Hunter's skill set is already at wide receiver. I mean, like, shocking skill set, I would say, for a player that really primarily played the position for the first time last season. He played a little bit of wide receiver at Jackson State, then really kind of came out because he needed to be that guy for this Colorado offense. And he was, and he looked the part for much of the season. So I don't know that he could be a top 10 pick at receiver today in the NFL, but I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't rule out that possibility, especially if there's a little bit of like two-way like sense there. If a team's like, maybe we can do it. But I think Travis Hunter going to the Commanders in this situation, assuming he's playing wide receiver, I mean, he can be the guy for this team. I mean, Terry McLaurin is great. He's getting a little bit older. I mean, he's not over the hill yet, but he'll be 29, around maybe 30 by the time that Travis Hunter's rookie year rolls around. And Jahan Dotson, who we both really like, I think would be a great number 2 option in an offense where Travis Hunter was a featured piece. If he was able to develop into that number 1 wide receiver, that his athleticism and the flashes of skill that you see suggest that he could be, which is, I mean, it's like shocking to say that for a player that is so inexperienced at the college level at the position, only the 1 year, 700-yard season at Colorado. But it's like he does all of the things that you want to see out of high-level wide receivers. So this is why we did this. This is why we included Travis Hunter, because if Travis Hunter is an offensive player in this upcoming draft, this is the range of the draft that I think you should expect him. He's not going to be like a fringe first kind of player. I think if he is, if we get the report that like he is a wide receiver and that's what he's going to be playing in the NFL, I think he's a top 5 dynasty rookie pick.
And we had a brief conversation on an earlier episode, I don't know exactly which one, of if you play in an IDP league and he's primarily a wide receiver that like plays as a sub corner and gets that DB eligibility, that'll be like problematic for, because like if you're in an IDP league, you kind of got to consider him in the top 1, 2, 3 picks of the draft, because not often are you gonna, but this is if he's a wide receiver. Like if he's playing corner and like does reverse every once in a while on offense as a wide receiver, like that's different. But if he's mainly a wide receiver and then he's like coming in on some like quarters packages or like dime packages, it's like, oh shit, like he's gonna be in like a 1,200-yard receiver in my DB spot. Like that's not good. But considering him as a wide receiver, I feel like this is a solid spot for him to go because, like you said, Terry McLaurin, he'll be 29 in September, so he'll be 30 at the beginning of next season, and he'll also be in the final year of his contract. So all of those things line up to Hunter probably being wide receiver 2 his first season, and then potentially being the wide receiver 1 in what could be a Jaden Daniels-led ascending offense in Washington. Like that's a recipe for success. And then add on top of it the IDP implications, and it becomes a little bit of a, could be a league-breaking kind of character.
I want to see it happen because I want to see how many people would like implement bans. Like how many leagues would
like you cannot start Travis Hunter in DB.
Yeah. If he has the eligibility, like how many leagues are just going to say, no, we're not going to let you do that.
Yeah.
And if it's a league that wants to have a little bit of fun and we do allow it, I absolutely think he goes 101. Like if you're playing in an IDP league, I don't see how you couldn't draft him 101 just because if it happens, then
if you have like a top 10 receiver, like theoretically, and just start slotting him in your DB spot, like how can you not be like, yeah, I want that, I need that?
Crazy. One of the most fun stories I can remember getting to follow through the NFL draft, dynasty draft season. We're going to get to see how it unfolds, but let's keep it moving. Pick 105 in this mock draft.
Okay. So this is my least favorite landing spot of the top guys, but I'm going with Tetairoa McMillan here. He got drafted number 12, which sounds excellent. But in this mock draft, he goes to the Colts. And we had a lot of conversations about the Colts and their passing game when we talked about A.D. Mitchell over all of 2024 after the draft. And now we see, Tet McMillan go there at 12, and it's like, wow, great draft capital, but we're going to an offense that has some guys. We have Michael Pittman, we have A.D. Mitchell, who, if he has a good rookie year, who knows, and Alec Pearce, who's a nice number 2-3 wide receiver. And then we have limited volume in the passing game because of how good the Jonathan Taylor, Anthony Richardson running game is. So it's like, how many mouths can we feed? And like, how talented do you have to be to overcome the limited targets? And that's where you're like, well, McMillan at 5 is a value then, because like he has that talent. He has the physical tools and the catch radius and the smooth route running and the hands, whatever. Like, he has everything that you'd want out of an X wide receiver. It's just that Michael Pittman's also there, who's kind of a target hog in that offense. He gets those, 10, 12 target games. So I don't know how they'd work it out, but at 5, I'm willing to bet on the talent.
Yeah, first of all, like, here's another reason why this is so interesting, because this is my number 1 player right now. This is my number 1 player in the class as of right now. But I think it goes to show how fluid the top of this draft is compared to the previous 2 years that we've done this. Like, there is a situation where a landing spot like this can dramatically affect the top 5 of a draft. It's not just the top 2. Yep. I think the first half of round 1 this year could be extremely fluid. It reminds me a lot of 2019, I believe it was, the Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, 2020, I think. 2020.
That sounds right.
Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Jonathan Taylor, CEH, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, like that whole cluster was like, any given month, the order could have been completely shifted around in terms of like projections and ADP and all of that. Like, I feel like this class has a similar potential where I think you're going to see a lot of these names kind of moving around throughout the process. And by the time we get to the spring and it's NFL draft time, we're going to learn kind of how it shakes out when the NFL draft happens because of exactly this scenario. And at first it's like, you see this, what's on your mind over there?
I'm sorry. So the NFL top 100 just came out.
Okay.
And I don't mean to be side scrolling,
No.
but I just saw it. And Aaron Rodgers is 92. He played 2 downs of football. Yeah. Like, how is he in the top 100?
That list is such a sham.
Like, Zaire Franklin is below him. Like, one of the best linebackers in football. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Hey, no, I appreciate that. Thank you for, now I'm mad about that. So I have to angry scroll that later. But yeah, this landing spot. I mean, it's like, on one hand, I look at this and I'm like, there's no way the Colts would do this. But on the other hand, NFL teams do weird shit at the draft.
Exactly.
And I won't even call this weird because I feel like a player like this at pick 12 does start to become a little bit of a value. And I think it's easy for a team at that point of the draft, if they're high enough on him, to say, I don't care that we have Michael Pittman. I don't care that we just drafted A.D. Mitchell. I don't care that we have Josh Downs in the slot. Like,
oh, I forgot about Josh Downs.
I mean, it's
too many guys.
There's a lot of guys here. And I think that's why it's, obviously McMillan falls down the board here to number 5. And there is even some overlap, I think, in terms of skill sets with Pittman and McMillan.
Yeah.
And I mean, Pittman's there. They locked him up. So it comes down to, what does A.D. Mitchell look like as a rookie? And if he doesn't look like the guy that can play that vertical role in this offense, I don't know that McMillan is that guy either. But I think the idea would be to pair Pittman up with a higher ceiling receiver potentially. And maybe that's, a little bit, I know there's some folks that believe in Michael Pittman more than his, wide receiver 2 sort of archetype seems to suggest. But in this case, I think McMillan represents value for the Colts at 12. I understand the pick in that sense, but it's going to affect him in dynasty drafts. Absolutely.
And I don't think it's a bad thing for the Pittman people out there. I'm talking to you. I don't think it's a bad thing for, him to be the T. Higgins to McMillan's Jamar Chase. I don't think that'd be a bad thing. I know that's putting lofty expectations on McMillan. I think he's that kind of physical player, though. That's a good thing. And maybe Pittman would be better suited for that kind of role.
I mean, we literally just talked about how many great teams in the NFL have 2 very high-end options at receiver. And I think right now, that's fresh in our minds, and it's actively happening. A.D. Mitchell, what is he in this offense? I think you and I might argue that he can be that player, that he can be that number 2, number 1 even option alongside of Michael Pittman. But in this scenario, maybe something fizzled out there. Maybe he didn't look like that guy as a rookie, and they felt the need to explore an option like McMillan, who you can feel a lot more comfortable about, I think, which is weird to say because we're still a year away from that. But all right, pick number 6. I am back on the clock, and now here's where I think the board kind of
gets very
it opens
funky
up a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that was our tier, and we ended it with the worst landing spot of the tier. Now we're back to opening things up. I am going to actually go back to running back here, I think. Pick number 6, I am going to take TreVeyon Henderson. And TreVeyon Henderson in this mock went round 2, but he went to the Raiders. And I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but I believe it was early-ish, mid to early round 2.
Pick 39.
39. So,
yes, so very early.
Very high running back draft capital. We had 2 guys go in the first. This was RB3. Goes to a spot, which again, it's open for the taking. I know Zamir White is maybe a thing that people are excited about. I am skeptical. Maybe in a year's time, we're looking at a guy that can be the running back there, but I doubt it. So TreVeyon Henderson in this case steps in, becomes RB1 immediately, a player that you and I both still really like. I think the name has just been around a long time, and we have some shiny new names in this class and players that are, I think, better than him right now. But I think he was RB4 for both of us in this class. And that is not that's a pretty ringing endorsement in a running back class that I think is going to end up being pretty strong. So I think in a good spot, good draft capital, I mean, middle of the first, man, it almost feels kind of like a value to get a player like this at number 6 this year.
No, I agree. This is the one spot higher than I had him on my board here, but I mean, at 39, if he goes that high, especially like you said, to a landing spot that has, questionable players, but low ceiling players, I would say, with Zamir White and Alexander Madison and Amir Abdullah, it's a similar situation with the Cowboys and with the Bengals. It's a team that's in sore need of a difference maker in the backfield. They lose Josh Jacobs, have kind of a gap year, and then fill that spot with TreVeyon. I feel like that's a nice kind of consolation prize, I guess. And they kind of, in this, they also got Shedeur Sanders. So they kind of revamped their whole offense through this draft. And I mean, TreVeyon is a difference maker. Like, even though you might have questions about like why'd he go back and his injury stuff and whatever, when he's on the field and he's healthy, he's a great player. And all of the injuries he's had have been pretty minor, in comparison to the guys that maybe go down with like an Achilles or an ACL or, tear and stuff. Henderson has been kind of dinged up for the most part. It hasn't been anything super serious. So that's a good thing. And, you get some better habits in terms of like training and stuff like that. You can clean some of that stuff up, and maybe you just get that full healthy season, see him come in as a difference making running back that can, run between the tackles, run outside, catch the ball out of the backfield and block. Like, you're feeling really good with him at 39 and at 6 in your rookie draft.
All right, pick 107.
All right, let me double check to make sure this is who I want. Oh man. So I'm between two guys. One has a better landing spot, one has a better draft capital. So that's where I'm at. I'm gonna go with Emeka Egbuka. So in this, he got picked number 17 to the Cleveland Browns, stays in Ohio. And while that's not like an incredible landing spot, because the passing game has been pretty shaky with Deshaun Watson in, and there's like a few names in that wide receiver room. Like, we'll see how it shakes out throughout the year. I think there's just a lot of uncertainty around what this team is going to look like in 2025. You have Amari Cooper, you have Jerry Jeudy, who they just traded for and extended. You have Elijah Moore, who they traded for. Like, there's these. I feel like their coach is a dynasty guy, and like he's just like, oh man, I can get Elijah Moore for a 3rd round pick, and then there's like, I can get Jerry Jeudy. I watched him at Alabama, like tearing people up. Let's get that guy in the room. And here's Emeka Egbuka, who's on the board at 17. Just can't pass him up. He's got to bring him in. So I don't love the spot, but at 7, when you have like top 20 draft capital as a receiver at 17, like, you just kind of got to go for it, especially with a talent like Egbuka, who we've talked about as an elite slot weapon who came in lieu of JSN's injury and was just as good as JSN was. And we were talking about Jackson Smith-Njigba as our number 1 receiver in the class that he was in with, Zay Flowers and Quinn Johnston and Jordan Addison. So this is a player that might not have the highest ceiling out of these guys, but has a very high floor and is a very steady slot player. Now, can he supplant a Jerry Jeudy? I don't know, but I feel good about that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of love the spot in a weird way. Like, I think honestly, like, the Amari Cooper, Emeka Egbuka, like, is Emeka Egbuka, Amari Cooper in the slot? Maybe. Like, I mean, I don't. That's pretty lofty, but I think similar size players that do similar things well. One's going to play in the slot, one's playing out wide, and we've seen Amari Cooper, despite all of this weird, whatever's happening with the Browns, Deshaun Watson and this passing game, Joe Flacco, whatever the hell. I mean, he's continued to have excellent seasons. I mean, last season, 1,300 yards, Amari Cooper. I mean, it's almost like crazy that he's been able to maintain this level of success in such an uncertain environment. And there's been rumors about are they ready to move on from him? There's been some trade rumors around Amari Cooper's name right now. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them potentially looking to add to this position. I know they got Jerry Jeudy. I know they paid Jerry Jeudy, but like, that still to me feels like a project, and we're going to find out what happens this year and what that means for them. Obviously, I like Cedric Tillman, but Emeka Egbuka is obviously the better player than Cedric Tillman. So if Judy fizzles out and Tillman ends up as the number 2 option, then here might be number 1, and I think given the draft capital he got in this mock draft, being a first round pick and a fairly high first round pick, which I think is warranted. I mean, I don't know that I would pick him at 17 or whatever he went at here, but I think definitely worthy of a first round pick and a player that, I mean, he would have been my pick here if I was in your shoes. So,
yep. So you're up with number 8.
Number 8, and this one is tricky for me, but I think I have to do this. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna take Isaiah Bond at number 8. So Isaiah Bond in this mock draft did go in the second round. He was pick 41, but he went to the Bills. And I think Keon Coleman is great, and I'm excited to see what Keon Coleman can do as a rookie. I think this is the player that not only complements Coleman pretty well in this offense, but also I think a player that can be like the number 1 option in this offense. Like, I think Curtis Samuel gets brought in, and I think you have a player here in Isaiah Bond that can do the role, that can play the role that Curtis Samuel is going to play this year. And people are pretty excited about that right now. And I think for good reason, because I think the Keon Coleman rookie year hype was a little bit over dramatic. Like, as somebody who likes Keon Coleman, I don't think it's going to happen this season. So I think you're going to see Curtis Samuel operating in a pretty featured role in this offense. And then I think you have a player here in Isaiah Bond that can come in and be the future of that position in this offense. So I think it's a really good fit, player that can stretch the field for Josh Allen, that can work the middle of the field, the intermediate areas of the field as well. You're going to have Keon Coleman being that sort of, boundary ball winner. If he can play that role effectively in the NFL, that's the hope, that's the dream. And then you're going to have a player like this, maybe playing out of the slot, that can do some of the more down the field things. So I think landing spot, there's another player here that I was thinking about taking, but I'm going to give the tie to Isaiah Bond given the spot.
I was considering Isaiah Bond with my last pick because I like the Bills landing spot so much. Like, I know he's going number 41 to the Bills in this scenario, but a 5'11" kind of speedster who, like you said, gets to come in and supplant Curtis Samuel, who, I mean, who knows what that's going to look like, because Curtis Samuel kind of had a little bit of a resurgence last year. Like, it was just like the beginning of the year, it was like, oh my God, Curtis Samuel, is he back? And it kind of fizzled out as the year went on. But Buffalo comes in and they're like, hey, man, you and Keon have the keys to this passing game. You, Keon, and obviously Dalton Kincaid. But in the wide receiver room, and Isaiah Bond can come in and either, take the role that Curtis Samuel is doing, or, he can complement both Keon Coleman and Curtis Samuel, I think, pretty well as a Z wide receiver. He can go out and, run a couple big boy routes, and he's a pretty solid route runner. He's got the speed. He can stretch the field, while Keon works more of the intermediate sideline, and then Curtis Samuel does, some of the backfield stuff, some of the over the middle stuff. So I feel like regardless, he can be either the wide receiver 1 or a heavily targeted wide receiver 2, with all of these guys. I think he meshes well with everybody. But if they decide to move on from Curtis Samuel, even better for Bond, because then he can play, kind of flex in between the Y and the Z and do a little bit of everything. So I just really love this spot for him. I love, honestly, the Bills getting a wide receiver is something that happens in, it was happening in every 2024 mock draft. They end up getting Keon Coleman. hopefully 2025, they're going to keep mocking him wide receiver, especially if Keon Coleman is the project we expect him to be. They're going to get mocked wide receiver, and if they go Bond or anybody else, like, I'll be happy to try to snatch him up.
Yeah, and I like the point you brought up there too with Dalton Kincaid playing in the slot potentially as a power slot, tight end, flex weapon sort of player. Isaiah Bond, very versatile in his usage last year. So, I mean, we're talking 58% out wide, primarily in the Z role, and 40% in the slot. So a player that they could mix and match in this offense, but will, potentially find a home in that Z role, like you said, with Dalton Kincaid in the slot and Keon Coleman playing the X, and then Curtis Samuel, obviously mixing in there as well, assuming that he does have a good year this year. So, yep. All right, pick number 9.
Pick number 9 for me, ID people right here, James Pearce. So James Pearce was the number 1 pick in this mock draft. He went to the Carolina Panthers. Unfortunate for the Panthers, have the number 1 pick again. But I mean, we sung his praises last week. I failed to remember to put him into my list. I'm still atoning for that, but I'm making up for it here by taking him number 9 as IDP 1. And I think I don't remember exactly where Will Levis ended up in our rankings, Will Anderson, not Will Levis. I know where Will Levis ended up. It's not very high, but I don't know where Will Anderson ended up. But I think Pearce probably one-ups him at number 9. It's probably pretty close, but yeah. Pearce, freak athlete.
I remember Will Anderson, I think, being 11 in my rankings that year. Like, it was one of the last 2 picks, I think, of the first round. And I think in this case, like, given how the board looks right now, I think this feels pretty right. And yeah, apparently I cannot, like, I will not do this whole, like, I really think this could be the number 1 pick, because apparently it is. Like, here's my confirmation that here he is at the number 1 pick in a mock draft for 2025. So that is very much in the cards for James Pearce. It seems like it is a pretty standard opinion of this player, and for good reason, because he is an incredibly impressive edge prospect, one that, you and I are both very high on. Expect him to be a first round pick in IDP leagues that score similarly to us, in which these elite edge rushers are prioritized and can be weapons in the game. I think James Pearce has the potential to be that sort of player. And I wouldn't necessarily, like, I know Will Anderson came into his final year with a ton of buzz because he's coming off of this, like, potentially Heisman defensive campaign. I would not be shocked if by the middle of this season we are already starting to talk about James Pearce in that same fashion. Like, I think right now it feels a little weird to be like, this is the next first round edge, because he's not that household name right now. But I think middle of this college football season, I think we might be there. And then it starts to become very normalized that, yes, this is an elite edge prospect and one that belongs in this spot in a dynasty rookie draft.
Yep, 100% agree. This is the type of guy that you can feel good about taking early, somebody that you can slot into your DL spot and feel comfortable about that through a season. I mean, beyond being a physical freak, like, he has a bag of pass rush moves and counters that he can go to. So, I mean, here we go. IDP are people too.
They sure are, man. And okay, so number 10, I am going to take Colston Loveland. So Colston Loveland in this mock draft did in fact go in the first round. He was selected by the Dolphins at pick
21.
So he got the draft capital. Like, he's not top 10, or top 15, whatever, Brock Bowers, but he's not Brock Bowers, obviously. So this is more than enough for me to say he belongs in the first round. I think this is about the spot that feels pretty natural for him, somewhere in this 9 to 12 range in this case. The one thing I will say is, like, when you see the Dolphins landing spot, it feels kind of fun because it's this high-powered offense, a lot of speed, a lot of skill. We don't really know what a Mike McDaniel offense looks like with a tight end. Like, they just haven't had the player, I don't think, in place, and I don't know if this offense will prioritize the tight end. It certainly won't prioritize the tight end with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in place. There would be questions at this point in time about Tyreek Hill's future and what is happening there. Like, is he actually going to retire? But I think in this case, the talent of Loveland and the draft capital that he gets is enough to roll the dice on a player, even when you're not quite sure what it looks like. A player that we expect to play out of the slot primarily as a tight end, unless he bulks up a little bit, gets a little bit stronger, and proves he belongs in a more inline role. But that is not how Michigan was using him last year. So right now it feels more safe to say he's headed for one of these move tight end roles where he's flexed out into the slot. It's kind of weird in this offense, but like I said, talent, landing spot, can't ignore it.
Loveland, tight ends. This is what do we
have a thing with this?
I do. I ended up putting Loveland at 12 on my list here. He got into the first round. He was not a first rounder in my rankings, but I mean, if you get this kind of draft capital, this is like the Kincaid range of draft capital. It's not like Pitts, it's not Bowers, but it is in that, like, tier 2 kind of tight end where it's like maybe they're not generational, but they are quite good and they are really good receiving threats. I do like the Dolphins landing spot. Like, regardless of what happens with Tyreek, there is a hole to fill with this tight end spot in general. Like, this is a play action heavy offense. This is an RPO heavy offense where Tua has to make quick middle of the field reads and he has to throw with anticipation. Now, generally, they do that with speed by getting their wide receivers to the middle of the field quickly with motion and with, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill being some of the fastest humans on earth. That being said, having Loveland already in the middle of the field and just running like crossers, posts, ins, drags, slants, like whatever, out of the slot and out of the traditional tight end slot, it could be just a target vacuum for him. Like, getting the ball in his hands quickly and letting him get, 6-8 yards a pop and, use his yards after the catch ability to go get a few more. So I really liked this. I'm afraid of taking tight ends in the first round when they're not, the guy. But if you're this good as Colston Loveland is and you get picked at 21 by a team with a glaring hole at tight end, I can't help but to say, hey, you can be a first rounder. You're going to be on the fringe for me, but you're in there.
Yeah, and I think we're both on record here of saying, like, depending on how this season goes, we could be talking about a player like this even higher in a dynasty rookie draft. Like, if he takes that step forward and kind of ascends into that, he's not going to get to the Pitts Bowers tier. I don't think, like, pretty confident saying that, but I think TJ Hawkinson was kind of like the midpoint there, where he was more of a mid dynasty rookie pick and a player that went around pick 12 in the NFL draft. Like, I think that is within the range of outcomes. Now, this isn't a player that I can see blocking like Hawkinson and giving you that two-way ability, but I think his upside as a receiver might warrant a pick like that. So Another fun player to track this year and to see how he develops, a player that needs development. But as you can see already, the buzz is here. This is a player that is being viewed by external sources as a potential round 1 tight end.
I have pick 11.
Take it away.
I'm between two players again. It's a similar situation where it's like my, pre-mock draft value and landing spot and draft capital in this mock. But I'm going to go with Evan Stewart here. Evan Stewart, the wide receiver out of Oregon, got picked number 34 to the Patriots in this mock. And they're, again, this is a wide receiver room in flux. They drafted Jalen Polk and Javon Bakers in the 2024 draft. They have, I think Kedrick Bourne is still in that room, but regardless, who knows what the wide receiver 1 situation is. It's why they're being rumored to potentially trade for Brandon Ayuk. They need a guy. And if they go without adding somebody like a Brandon Ayuk, trading for somebody, going into free agency for somebody, Evan Stewart getting drafted here would be all right, so we're going to roll out Evan Stewart as a wide receiver 1 across from Jalen Polk, and we'll see what that rookie year, what that delivers for him. But regardless, I feel like they're complementary players anyway, because Polk, he's a winner at the catch point. He's a guy that can do stuff on the boundary, while Evan Stewart is more of a technical wide receiver that wins with speed and footwork. And so you put those guys across from each other, you work in Javon Baker, you have an interesting passing game with a guy that we both believe in, Drake May, under center, building this offense up and starting from basically scratch with how this team has been managed in the post Tom Brady, Bill Belichick era. It's all been downhill. They've basically been, down to the studs for this offense. And now you're going to have to start patching stuff together, start hanging drywall, putting up plaster, and, the wide receivers, some decorations on the walls.
Yeah, this is a fun spot, I think. I'm very curious to find out what this offense looks like this year. I think we're going to learn a lot about what a wide receiver pick could mean for this team next year, because I think, like you said, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, if one of those players takes a step this year and proves that they can be that sort of number 1 or, strong number 2 option, I still think the door is open for another player to come in. I don't know if Evan Stewart is that player. I don't know that I feel confident enough in him today to say throwing him into this room is final infinity stone. We're good to go now. But I think certainly a player here that represents a lot of upside, that I think is going to end this college football season with a lot of buzz, because I think he's going to have a really strong year. And honestly, a player that I don't know that we have seen the best version of. And I mean, we did talk about this. I want to see the best version of Evan Stewart this season. And at that point in time, what does that mean? What can this player be in the NFL? So I think it makes a lot of sense. He probably would have been my pick here as well, because I think the board is kind of leveling out quite a bit. And I think Stewart, the upside here is standing out for me for sure.
I'm excited.
I am excited to make the final pick of this way, way too early 2025 Dynasty rookie mock. But man, I think I'm going to have to do something really crazy right now based on how this shook out. And here is our final example of how you think you have everything figured out a year in advance, and then the NFL draft finds a way to just take it all away from you. Because if you've listened to summer scouting through this entire process so far, you might notice a glaring omission in this mock draft is my number one running back in this class. And that is Omarion Hampton. Why has Omarion Hampton fallen all the way down the board? It's because he went to the Falcons in the second round. Now, there's a part of me that is saying, it's your number one running back. Just take him. It's pick 12. And the other part of me is like Bijan Robinson. So I'm not going to take Omarion Hampton at number 12. Like, if this were to happen, clearly this mock drafter does not see Hampton in the same light as me, sees him more as a depth option maybe, or maybe this is one of those things where the talent was too good and the Falcons just said, we're going to Charbonnet this thing, but instead of Kenneth Walker, we have Bijan Robinson. Either way, based on how Charbonnet's rookie year went and how I expect this upcoming season to go for Bijan, I cannot take Omarion Hampton here. So I am going to actually do something pretty weird. I'm going to take Harold Perkins.
Yep, I like this.
2 IDPs in round 1. But in this situation, Harold Perkins went 13th overall to the Buccaneers. Now, Devin White was a bigger player. But I think Buccaneers fans, if this were to happen, could have some sort of flashback to a player that they loved. I don't think I can say love anymore because it seemed like things ended kind of rocky, but I think you're getting a similar player in Harold Perkins. You're getting a linebacker with extreme athleticism with, there's no questions about getting sideline to sideline. There's no questions about, can you be the guy racking up tackles in the middle of the defense? I think there are plenty of questions, and we've explored these questions about Perkins' game today, being that he is very fresh into this off-ball role and his size at 220 pounds. So all of those questions still exist. But if this season, the 2024 season, goes well, we see growth out of Perkins. Maybe he bulks up a little bit, and he goes 13th, you're absolutely thinking about a player like that at this spot, considering his upside. So I think there's a mold here. You can see it very clearly. You can see the parallels between Harold Perkins and the LSU linebacker that played in Tampa Bay before him. You can see all that, and it becomes very easy to talk yourself into, let's draft this freak and let's see what happens at pick 12, given the fact that the board is kind of wide open at this point.
Yeah, I had somebody else here, but I didn't feel great about it. And I was considering putting Harold Perkins in this spot. And the question between, is he going to stay a linebacker? Is he going to work as an edge? Where are we going here with this player at LSU? And like you said, at 220 pounds, it's unlikely he's going to be playing at the end of the line of scrimmage. So if he's a off-ball linebacker and he's going to be the Devin White replacement, I don't know. I don't know what this looks like, because KJ Britt, he played well in the relief of Devin White at the end of last season. And Levante David, he's been a good player for a decade. So it becomes a little bit of a question mark, but with the talent that Perkins has, this is a guy we've had our eye on since he was a freshman, because he's such a dynamic athlete and he can do so many things as an edge player and as a linebacker that you almost can't help but to be like, hey man, just take him and we'll see what he does best. And then we'll throw him out there as a team. So I don't know. That's why I'm hesitant to be yeah, stamp of approval, first rounder in Dynasty. But like, I don't hate it.
I think the conversation for NFL teams is kind of similar to conversations for a dynasty player.
Yeah.
Which is, I see all the red flags with you. Like I see all that, but goddamn,
Yeah.
if you hit, man, like you're going to be special. You could be special. So I think I'm looking at names here. Like I'll throw out a couple that didn't make the cut. I mean, Trey Harris, one of your top 5 receivers, my wide receiver 6 coming into this season. He ends up in Pittsburgh, which I don't hate the spot. Like Perkins, we'll see what Roman Wilson does this year. It's just like, where's the upside there? I don't know. Omari and Hampton had that conversation. Like, I'm not drafting an RB2 at this spot. Like one that's behind a player that I expect to be, the best running back in the league. I'm not drafting that player's handcuff at number 12. And then after that, it's like, I'm not taking a quarterback because I don't like these quarterbacks enough to even think about that at this point. And then the other names here are like Luke Lachey got second round capital of the Chargers. I like that, but I think he makes more sense as a early second sort of dynasty pick in the situation. And then there's a couple receivers that went late second, and I'm already not taking Trey Harris. So I'm not going to take Torrey Horton, the new wide receiver 2 in Detroit, so Harold Perkins has an upside play working for him that most players don't at this point. And obviously we're a year away. This is all probably going to change, and there's going to be new players that enter the fold and change everything. But I think at least for now, it's kind of interesting to see how a player with immense upside warps the board, even when you have questions yourself about how he's going to translate to the NFL.
I just love how this is exactly how it goes with the NFL draft, where, like you said, you feel like you have everything figured out, and then Omari and Hampton goes to the Falcons. And it's like, why would they do that? It's like that. And like, we sit here and we're like, well, the Falcons wouldn't actually take a running back, but like, are you sure?
Because weird shit happens.
Yeah, it happens all the time. So I like this as an exercise in like thinking, what happens if like it doesn't go all roses like you expect it to, and everybody goes to a spot that they desperately need that player in that position. Like, what happens when quarterbacks go off the board earlier than you think and somebody falls? It all gets weird. And I like to, actually enter that headspace rather than living in like the fantasy world where players are just going to end up wherever you want them to. And like, which best suits their talents and abilities, and which best suits what position they play. Like, we're going to end up with some weird stuff. We're going to end up with some guys in spots we don't like. And that's why I appreciate this kind of thing.
It was like a month before the NFL draft that we were talking about A.D. Mitchell as like the 6th player in the class.
Yep.
And then that player went mid to late second in the NFL to a weird spot.
Yep.
And then ended up as a fringe first rounder at best.
I took him at 302 in a draft on Saturday.
That's what I'm saying, man. So it happens every year. It never goes exactly how you want. Obviously, like I said, this draft we're just learning it. We're just getting into it. All of this is probably going to change, but I think some of what we talked about today it was fun. It was a lot of fun to explore these sorts of weird scenarios this far out, because it paints the picture of what happens when this class gets weird. We do a top 12 and it's like, man, pick 12 this year could be kind of crazy. And then you realize like, well, this is why there's a fall off at the end of the first round most years, because this weird tier develops and then you're stuck with decisions like I was at with number 12. So a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun doing this. Very excited, maybe even more so now to like see how this process unfolds. I mean, it's always fun to tie NFL teams into the fold as early as possible, because that's what this is all about at the end of the day. So, but we have still a long road ahead of us to get to the college football season, but it is rapidly approaching. We are all playing an excessive amount of college football 25 right now, getting very excited for the college football season. And it's about a month away. We're about a month away now from real college football kicking off. I'm gonna keep next week's episode as a surprise. We have it on pen to paper, but maybe we're gonna be in the lab this week. Maybe we're gonna be fine tuning a little bit. I don't know. We're gonna just have fun with it. It's summer. We're just vibing right now, so that's what this is all about. So stay tuned. Find out next week what we're talking about.
Hell yeah. Yeah, we're cooking something in the lab for summer. Get it on the grill. We get outside, maybe sweating a little bit over the charcoal, but it'll turn out okay.
It's going to be another new episode, whatever
That's
it
right.
is. It's going to be another first for Camp Dynasty. This is all part of the extended phase 1 that we are doing here in season 3. So we're going to have fun with it, like I said. And if you enjoyed our new topic this year, the first new topic, a hypothetical landing spot mock draft, be sure to find us on X at Camp Under. God, I said it. Twitter.
In the midst of what Elon's been doing to this country. Jesus.
I will never, ever give him the satisfaction, especially now that my For You page is truly reached cesspool levels.
It's horrible.
It's never been worse than it is right now. But
I'm like, wow, why does my Twitter suck? And I realize that I'm just not on the following page.
Yeah. So follow us, so we'll appear on your following tab. You won't have to be on the For You tab. That is Camp_Dynasty, and TikTok at Camp.Dynasty. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel, where video feeds of the pods do go up every week. And of course, like, rate, review, subscribe, share, and follow the pod feed, because we appreciate it.
Amen, brother.
And with that, thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty this week, and we'll see you next week.